You are not irrational because you are uneducated. You are not irrational because you are careless. You are irrational because your brain was built that way. And today, we are going to prove it. Here is a simple question. A bat and a ball together cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Most people answer immediately, 10 cents. It feels right. It feels obvious. But it is wrong. The correct answer is 5 cents. Take a moment and check the math. If the ball costs 5 cents and the bat costs $1 more, the bat costs $1.05. Together, that is $1.10. The answer was right there, but your brain did not look for the right answer. It looked for the fast answer. This small puzzle is one of the most famous tests in behavioral psychology. It is called the cognitive reflection test, developed by psychologist Shane Frederick. And the reason it matters is not because math is hard. The reason it matters is what it reveals about how your brain processes information. Your brain has a default mode. That default mode is not logic. It is speed. It is pattern recognition. It is finding the answer that feels right, as quickly as possible. And the vast majority of people, including highly educated people, get it wrong. Not because they cannot do the math, but because their brain never paused long enough to question the first answer it generated. Behavioral psychologists describe this as a failure of cognitive reflection. The brain produces a fast, intuitive response, System 1, and most of the time, that response goes completely unchallenged. System 2, the slower, deliberate thinking system, should step in and say, "Wait, let me check that." But System 2 is lazy. It only activates when it has to, and most of the time, it decides it does not have to, because the fast answer felt so natural, so obvious, so clearly right, that there was nothing to question. This is not a flaw in unintelligent people. In studies conducted across university populations, including students at elite institutions, the majority answered that question incorrectly. The brain is not a rational machine. It is an efficiency machine, and efficiency is not the same as accuracy. Now here is where it gets more interesting. The irrationality does not stop at simple puzzles. It runs through every dimension of how you perceive reality. Behavioral psychology has documented dozens of systematic ways the human brain distorts information, not randomly, but in completely predictable patterns. These are cognitive biases, and they are not occasional errors. They are the default operating system. Let us look at 3 of the most powerful ones. The first is called the anchoring effect. When your brain encounters a number, any number, it uses that number as a reference point for all subsequent judgments, even when that number is completely irrelevant. In one study, participants were asked to spin a wheel that randomly landed on either 10 or 65. Then they were asked, what percentage of African countries are in the United Nations? The people who spun 10 guessed around 25%. The people who spun 65 guessed around 45%. A random number on a spinning wheel shifted their answer by 20 percentage points. That is the anchoring effect. Your brain takes whatever number it encountered most recently and builds its judgment around it. This is why products are shown with a crossed-out original price. This is why salary negotiations always favor whoever states a number first. Your starting point shapes your conclusion, and most of the time, you never notice it happening. The second bias is called the availability heuristic. Your brain judges the probability of something based on how easily an example comes to mind. If you can think of it quickly, your brain assumes it must be common. If it is hard to recall, your brain assumes it must be rare. This sounds reasonable, but it leads to systematic errors. After a plane crash is reported in the news, people dramatically overestimate the danger of flying. After a local crime story receives heavy coverage, people overestimate how dangerous their neighborhood is. Meanwhile, the actual statistical risks that kill far more people, poor diet, sedentary lifestyle, stress, receive almost no mental weight, because they do not produce vivid, memorable examples. Your brain is not calculating probability, it is measuring memorability. And those are very different things. The third bias is perhaps the most uncomfortable. It is related to the Dunning-Kruger effect. Research by psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger found a consistent pattern. People with limited knowledge in a subject tend to significantly overestimate their competence, and people with deep expertise tend to underestimate it. The less you know, the more confident you feel, because you do not yet know enough to understand what you do not know. This is not an insult to anyone. It is a structural feature of how human self-assessment works. The very knowledge you need to recognize your gaps is the knowledge you are missing. And this applies in every domain. Medical decisions, financial choices, political beliefs, professional judgment, confidence is not evidence of competence, but the brain treats it as if it is. These three biases, anchoring, availability, overconfidence, are not separate glitches. They are all expressions of the same underlying reality. Your brain is not trying to find the truth. Your brain is trying to function efficiently under conditions of limited time and limited information. It evolved in an environment where fast decisions were survival decisions, where hesitation could be fatal, where good enough was better than perfect. The problem is that the modern world does not reward speed the same way. The modern world rewards accuracy. It rewards careful financial thinking, careful professional judgment, careful evaluation of evidence. And your ancient brain is still optimizing for speed. You see these biases operating everywhere once you know to look. The first salary figure mentioned in a negotiation becomes the anchor, and every counteroffer is measured against it rather than against what is actually fair. The news story you read this morning shapes which risks feel real today, regardless of what the statistics actually say. The confidence you feel about a decision has almost no reliable relationship to how correct that decision actually is. And in each case, your brain is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem is that its design predates the complexity of the world you are living in. So, what is the takeaway? Not despair, awareness. The research consistently shows that simply knowing about a cognitive bias does not make you immune to it, but it does give you something valuable. A pause, a moment between the instinct and the action, a small window in which System 2 can step in and ask, is this actually right, or does it just feel right? That question is harder to ask than it sounds, because System 1 does not feel like guessing. It feels like knowing. The goal is not to distrust every thought you have. The goal is to hold your most confident thoughts with just a little more humility, because the brain that feels most certain is often the brain that most needs to slow down. This is the thinking error, where we explore the hidden patterns behind the choices you make every day. If this gave you something to think about, you already know what to do.